Hey Deep Divers, welcome back. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. We love hearing from you. Today we're diving deep into the sometimes murky waters of American politics, and specifically we're looking at how presidential nominees are actually chosen. We've got this pretty intense CNN interview with Kevin O'Leary, and he's really going after the potential nomination of Kamala Harris. He even calls it undemocratic. So, is he right? I guess that's what we're here to find out.
Well, it's certainly a bold statement, and it kind of gets at this bigger question about what we even mean when we say democratic in the U.S. political system, right?
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just having elections, is it?
Okay, so let's break down O'Leary's argument here. He's basically saying that he wants a presidential winner, someone who he thinks can win the general election. And he seems pretty convinced that Harris isn't that person. He even compares choosing a president to picking a stock. Like looking for the one with the highest potential return.
Right, and that analogy really shows how much he's focused on just results over everything else. He goes on to claim that Biden was basically pressured to step down, and he even questions whether Harris was actually the right choice to replace him. And his biggest issue seems to be that the Democratic Party might circumvent democracy by appointing Harris without a primary.
Interesting. So CNN didn't just let him say all that without pushing back, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Abby Phillip and the panel pushed back, reminding O'Leary that, hey, Hillary Clinton won a primary, implying that's kind of the Democratic norm, right? They also kind of challenged his focus on what the Democratic Party is doing internally, suggesting that voters might be more worried about other issues.
Yeah, and Phillip really makes a key point. The primary process itself isn't even required by the Constitution. Political parties have a surprising amount of freedom in how they choose their nominees. The only real rule is that they have to follow state deadlines for when that nominee has to be chosen. They could technically pick someone in December and skip the primaries completely. Kind of wild, huh?
Wait, really? I had no idea. See, this is why I love doing these deep dives. You learn something new every time. So it sounds like things aren't always so clear-cut. Phillip had this great line that I think sums it all up. She said, and I quote, "You're describing something as undemocratic that has absolutely nothing to do with the democratic process." Mic drop.
Haha, yeah, it's a great line. And it perfectly captures the heart of this debate, right? Is choosing a nominee without a primary automatically undemocratic? Or is it actually just a party exercising its power in a legitimate way? That's where things get really interesting. The answer isn't so simple. In fact, there are some examples from history that might surprise you. So, okay, let's dig into this whole thing about bypassing primaries. Is it automatically undemocratic? I mean, it's a tough question because democracy, well, it's not always so straightforward.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just like whoever gets the most votes wins, right?
Yeah.
It's also about making sure things are fair, everyone's represented, everyone has a voice, all that.
Yeah, exactly. And when we're talking about picking a president, those ideals, sometimes they clash a bit. On the one hand, primaries let more people in a party, regular party members, have a say in who's representing them.
Right. But then on the other hand, primaries can get super expensive and really divisive, and sometimes they end up with a nominee who might not be the best candidate to win in the general election.
Exactly. And think back to the 1968 Democratic National Convention. Hubert Humphrey got the nomination even though he didn't even run in any primaries. That decision, it caused riots, protests. It made a lot of voters feel like their voices didn't matter.
Wow, so skipping primaries, it can really backfire.
Yeah, definitely. It can lead to all these accusations of secret deals, elite control, exactly what O'Leary's suggesting. And it can alienate party members who feel like they're not being heard, which could then hurt the nominee's, legitimacy in the public eye.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But couldn't there be some good things about skipping primaries, too?
There are definitely arguments for it. I mean, think about it. If you bypass a primary, a party could pick a candidate who has a really good chance of winning the general election, even if that candidate isn't super popular with the party's base.
So it's kind of like a long game strategy. You're sacrificing maybe some popularity within the party, but hoping to have a better shot at winning the whole thing.
Right. Plus, it can save a lot of time and money and prevent those, internal fights that can hurt party unity.
Okay, so it sounds like it's all about weighing the pros and cons. There's no easy answer, right?
Yeah, it's a real trade-off. And it gets the whole role of political parties in this process, right? They're not just sitting on the sidelines. They're really shaping the field of candidates and influencing who gets nominated.
Which is interesting because O'Leary seems to ignore that. Like he's just focused on this idea that they're circumventing democracy. But parties have always had a big hand in choosing their nominees, haven't they?
Absolutely. And that's not always a bad thing. Parties can bring some structure and organization to what could be a super chaotic process. They also want to make sure their candidates, line up with certain values and policies.
But then there's always that risk that parties could get too powerful, right? Like, what if they start shutting down different voices within the party?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a balancing act, and we as citizens need to pay attention to it. Now, going back to O'Leary's stock picking analogy, it's like he's saying, find me the candidate with the best chance of winning the presidency. I don't care how we get there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like, just give me a winner.
But that raises some important questions, right? Is winning really the only thing that matters when we're choosing a president? Or are there other things that should be more important, like their experience, their character, their policy positions?
Right. And how much should we even care about what goes on inside the parties when we're making our decision?
It's complicated, There's no simple answer.
Definitely. And that's what makes these conversations so important, right? We have to think critically about the systems we have and ask ourselves if they're really working for us.
I totally agree. Let's bring it back to you, our listeners.
Yes. What do you think? Does O'Leary's focus on winners make sense to you? Do you care most about who can win, or are there other things you look for in a president? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear what you think.
Okay, so we've really dug into this whole primary versus appointment thing and the role of political parties. But, we can't ignore the elephant in the room here. O'Leary's comments, they seem specifically targeted at Kamala Harris.
You're right. You're right. It's hard not to think about, the whole gender and race dynamic here. Harris, she's the first person of color to be vice president. And it feels like her potential nomination is being, scrutinized way more than we've seen before.
Yeah, I think that's true. It reminds us that these conversations we're having, about democracy and political processes, they always exist within this bigger social and cultural context, right? We can't just separate them from issues of race, gender, power, all that.
So where does that leave us then? We've got O'Leary pushing this whole winner idea, CNN talking about how flexible the nomination process actually is, and then, this whole backdrop of all these complicated social and political forces. It's a lot.
It is. It's messy. It's complicated. There's no easy answers, but that's democracy. It's a constant work in progress, and it needs us to have these tough conversations, challenge our assumptions, really listen to different points of view.
Absolutely. Well said. And that's really what the deep dive is all about, right? It's about giving you, our amazing listeners, the knowledge and the insights you need to make sense of this crazy world we live in. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought-provoking question to chew on. How much weight should we really give to the internal processes of political parties when we're deciding who we want as president?
Yeah, that's a great question. Is it more important that a candidate follows a certain process? Or should we focus more on, do they actually have the qualities, the vision that we want in a leader? It's something to think about for sure. And we really encourage you to, grapple with these ideas, come to your own conclusions, and most importantly, talk about it. Have those conversations with other people respectfully, and with good information.
Couldn't agree more. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.